Okay, let's dive into this one. We're looking at a case that starts in, well, a seemingly ordinary place.
Yep.
A quiet town, you know the type.
Predictable, safe.
Yeah.
Until it wasn't.
Exactly. One night, stillness, just after midnight. Suddenly, bang! A 911 call shatters everything.
And what responders found was just horrific. We're talking September 29th, 2015, in Steuben County for the crime itself, though the call came a bit later. Source notes are a bit conflicting on the call date versus crime date, but the core events?
Yeah. And right away, there were no easy answers. No obvious leads, no weapon readily found. Just this scene of unbelievable violence.
It just felt impossible. How does that level of brutality happen there with no trace? That was the mystery.
But there was something, wasn't there? A key element that would eventually unlock it all.
An unexpected witness, yes. And we'll be drawing heavily from the source materials here, investigation transcripts, body cam notes, forensic reports, to piece this together.
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going through these sources, following the investigation's twists and turns from that first awful discovery.
Through all the dead ends and changing theories.
To how the truth, which turned out to be much darker than anyone imagined, finally came out. We're going to take you right into the heart of this case.
It really kicks off with that 911 call, logged just after midnight, September 28th, 2018, according to the log entry. And the detective, Dean Swan.
Yeah, the sources mention him. He had a bad feeling even before arriving, didn't he?
He did, a real sense of unease. Even though there was no prior history at that house, something told him this was different.
And that gut feeling was spot on.
Yeah.
The body cam descriptions, they're stark. The shock is palpable when they enter.
The neighbor who called 911, he'd seen something initially, and he just couldn't face going back in.
I can't even imagine.
What they found inside. Well, the source description is direct. Female, mid-30s, early 40s, beating to death. Her face is completely beaten in. Just brutal.
And it wasn't contained to one spot, was it? The descriptions are grim.
No, not at all. Blood on the wall, blood on the steps. There's blood all over up here. Looks like she was attacked in bed. It suggests a horrific struggle.
A struggle that moved through the house. There was a path of blood, right? Towards the kids' rooms.
Yeah, towards the children's rooms and then downstairs. The final assault seems to have happened in the kitchen area.
Allison Rian, from forensics, her description really paints a picture.
It does. She called it extremely bloody. They noted damage to the walls, which backs up the idea of a violent fight.
And that blood smear on the child's door handle.
Heartbreaking detail. It suggests Kelly Clayton, the victim, might have been desperately trying to reach her children. The injuries, especially to her face and head, pointed clearly to blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
A really vicious attack. You feel for her reading those reports.
The shock must have rippled through that whole tight-knit community. I mean, a neighbor too scared to re-enter the house.
Absolutely. This kind of violence was just unthinkable there. They searched outside, found some tire tracks, but crucially, no murder weapon nearby.
Which naturally leads investigators to the inner circle.
Always. Standard procedure, really.
Yeah.
You always look the people close as a spouse, you always look at the surviving spouse first.
So, Tom Clayton, the husband, he was on the scene.
He was. Described as erratic, very distraught. They actually removed him from the house pretty quickly.
In his initial story.
He said he'd just gotten home, claimed his 7-year-old daughter told him there was a robber in the house.
But the investigators, even then, they had doubts.
They did. The sources say something felt off about him. Despite his local standing, maybe a successful businessman, something didn't sit right with them, just an instinct at that point.
Then Kelly's sister arrived, Kim Bourgeois.
Yeah, clearly devastated. But she provided some really key details amidst her grief.
Like the cash.
Right. She mentioned Tom kept a large amount of cash in the house. That could feed the robbery theory, maybe?
Or maybe not. What else did she say?
Something potentially significant. Tom had recently fired several employees from his business, ServPro.
Okay, so that throws a couple of new possibilities into the mix, doesn't it?
Definitely. Now you're thinking, okay, was it about the money, a robbery gone bad, or is this maybe revenge? Someone holding a grudge against Tom?
It certainly complicates things beyond just looking at the husband. When you hear that cash in the house, fired employees, what direction does that point you in?
It forces you to widen the lens, consider those alternatives seriously. But, you know, as they dug into the robbery angle, it just started falling apart.
How so?
Well, there was no forced entry, none. And the big stuff, the safe, valuable jewelry, all untouched.
Doesn't sound like a typical burglary.
Exactly. Plus, home invasions like that were almost unheard of in that town. The crime scene itself, the sheer violence, it just didn't fit the pattern of a robbery.
So that led them to a pretty crucial conclusion.
Yeah, the sources capture it bluntly. This wasn't a robbery at all. That theory was out.
Which means the answer had to lie somewhere else. Somewhere closer to home, perhaps.
It brought them back inevitably to Tom, but also to that unexpected witness.
The 7-year-old daughter, Charlie. She was there. She saw something.
Imagine having to interview a child after that.
Yeah.
The sources really emphasize how carefully they approached it.
It must have been incredibly difficult. How do you even start that conversation?
Very gently. They used techniques like having blocks in the interview room, trying to make it less intimidating, carefully explaining about telling the truth versus telling a lie.
Trying to get information without causing more trauma.
Precisely. Showing real empathy. It's a delicate balance.
And what did Charlie say initially?
Her account was, well, the sources describe it as having a chilling calm. She said, a guy came in, started to H my mom. She mentioned him using this pipe thing.
Oh, wow. Did she describe what happened next?
She heard her mom's footsteps, frantic, and her mother yelling, "Run, Charlie, run!" Charlie followed her mom and saw a bad man in a black ski mask hurting her mother.
Just awful. And what did Charlie do?
Incredibly brave, but also so sad. She thought her mother was dead, so she went back to her room to protect her little brother. She was just trying to process this immense trauma, thinking they were alone until her dad arrived.
So the investigators needed more details, right? About the attacker?
Yes, they had to gently probe, asking about his appearance, anything she might have noticed, even through the terror.
And then she said something that just stopped them in their tracks.
She did. When they asked what the robber looked like, she gave this haunting answer. Could have been my dad, but he looked like my dad.
Looked like her dad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But then everything changed.
Yeah. That line from Charlie, looked like my dad, combined with their own gut feelings about Tom, it forced them to refocus squarely on him.
They had to look at him again, didn't they? But differently this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where that 911 call becomes absolutely crucial. Not just the initial panic, but the full recording.
What did they find?
Tom must have thought the call ended, but the mic stayed hot. It recorded him after the main call. And they heard him talking to Charlie, quietly, asking her, "Did you see a robber? Did you see a robber?" Almost coaching her.
Whoa. So, suggesting he might have been planting that idea before the police even got there.
It certainly looked that way. It paints a picture of manipulation, not just grief. Suddenly, his whole demeanor seemed calculated.
Which clashes completely with his public image, right? The sources paint him as quite the figure.
Oh, yeah. Local hockey star, Caslo King, charismatic, funny, apparently quite flirtatious. People seemed charmed by him.
But not the investigators.
No, they were far less impressed, as the source puts it. That initial off feeling they had, it was hardening into real suspicion, especially after hearing that recording.
Okay, so suspicion is high. Charlie's statement is powerful. The 911 call is damning. But there was a problem, wasn't there?
A big one. Physical evidence. Or rather, the lack of it on Tom.
The crime scene was incredibly bloody. You'd expect something.
Exactly. But they found no trace of Kelly's blood on Tom's clothes. Nothing to suggest he'd even touched her, not even to check on her or try to help. The sources specifically note he didn't make contact with her body.
That's strange. And initially, that helped him.
It did. It created this weird conflict. The scene screamed domestic violence. Charlie pointed towards him, but the forensics didn't place him at the murder itself.
So what happened legally?
Based on Charlie's identification and their overall suspicion, they did charge him with second-degree murder initially. But because they lacked that direct physical link.
He got bail for a murder charge.
Yeah, which is highly unusual. It put the investigators right back under pressure. Their prime suspect was out, and the case felt stalled again.
Okay, so Tom's out on bail. Where do they go from there? The investigation must have felt like it hit a wall.
It did, a bit. They had to regroup, brought in the search again. They started digging into Kelly's digital life phone messages.
Did anything?
No clear signs of domestic abuse reported by her, maybe hints of another relationship she was exploring, but nothing concrete pointing to who could have done this. No obvious external enemy.
So they circled back to that other detail from Kim, Kelly's sister.
Exactly. The fired employees, they started taking a much harder look at those names again.
And one name popped up.
Michael Beard. He stood out. He hadn't just worked for Tom at ServPro, but also another company, Paul Davis. And he'd been fired multiple times.
Fired for what?
Sources mentioned drinking, even stealing. Not a reliable guy, clearly.
And his personal situation.
Pretty desperate, actually, living paycheck to paycheck, really struggling. And the kicker?
What was that?
He was renting a house from Tom Clayton, and he was behind on rent. Tom had actually started the eviction process.
Wow. Okay, so this guy is financially underwater, and the victim's husband is literally trying to evict him. That's motive, potentially.
It's certainly a strong connection and a potential pressure point. This wasn't just some random disgruntled employee. He was facing ruin, and Tom held the strings.
So they brought Beard in.
They did. And initially, he played it cool, cooperative, polite, said he had no hard feelings towards Tom or Kelly.
Did he resist when they asked about his phone?
Surprisingly, no. He consented to a search. Investigators maybe didn't expect much, figuring he'd have wiped it.
But they found something significant, didn't they?
They did. Detective Allison noticed deleted messages, deleted calls. Suspicious, sure. But the real breakthrough was the phone's power log.
What did it show?
Michael Beard's phone had been deliberately powered off during the exact time window Kelly was murdered, then powered back on right after.
That's not just suspicious, that's highly specific.
It was the first solid piece tying Beard directly to the timeline of the murder. Didn't prove he did it, but it blew a huge hole in his story of being uninvolved. The focus shifted dramatically towards him.
Okay, so now Beard is firmly on their radar. The powered-off phone is a huge lead.
A huge lead. They're zeroing in on him. But then, another unexpected call comes in.
Who was it from?
Lucky Miller, the woman Tom claimed he was playing poker with on the night of the murder.
And she had something to add.
She did. She recalled a weird encounter with Tom earlier that day at a casino. He apparently blurted out, I didn't do it, unprompted. Talked about taking Kelly on a second honeymoon. It struck Lucky as really defensive and odd.
Okay, weird behavior. What about the poker night itself?
She remembered Tom borrowing her phone. He said his was dead or had no service, something like that.
Okay, and why was that significant?
Because later, Lucky checked her own phone bill or call log, and she noticed calls from that night had been deleted.
Deleted calls from her phone that Tom made.
Exactly. I set off alarm bells for her, so she called the police. I mean, why borrow a phone and wipe the history if you're just playing cards? It made no sense.
Absolutely. So the police pulled the actual records for her phone line.
They did. And bingo. The records showed 2 calls made from Lucky's phone by Tom at 10:53 p.m. that night.
Just before the estimated time of the murder. Who did he call?
This was the moment it all clicked together. The calls were to Michael Beard.
No way. So Tom was contacting Beard right before the murder, using a borrowed phone and trying to hide it.
Precisely. Suddenly, everything converged. Beard's desperation, his firings, the eviction, his phone being off during the murder, Tom's weird behavior, the coaching on the 911 call, and now this secret communication link right before the crime. They even found patterns of cryptic texts between them leading up to it.
Technology really started building the case here, didn't it?
Absolutely. GPS from company vehicles, cell tower pings, those phone records. It was creating a very clear picture of a conspiracy.
So with that phone record linking Tom and Beard, they brought Beard back in, right?
They did, and this time the pressure was immense. The sources mentioned he was visibly nervous, stressed. His stomach was apparently growling loudly during the interview.
A physical sign of the stress.
Definitely. And the detective, likely armed with info from Beard's girlfriend, whom they'd also interviewed, cut right to the chase.
What did they ask?
Mike, is $10,000 the reason that you killed Kelly?
Wow. Direct. And Beard.
There was a pause, the sources say. Then, quietly, he admitted it. Yeah, that's why I did it.
He confessed. Just like that.
He confessed. He laid out the whole plan. Tom offered him $10,000 to kill Kelly.
And the fire. They found gasoline at the scene.
Right. Part of the plan was to burn the house down afterwards, make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Beard said the initial plan involved the kids being safely away at Kim's house. But after the murder, he just panicked and couldn't go through with the arson.
So the gasoline made sense now. And did Beard provide proof?
He did. He led them straight to the evidence. The murder weapon first.
What was it?
Described as a maul handle, basically a sledgehammer handle without the head, found discarded off a road.
And forensics.
Confirmed Kelly's DNA and blood on it. Fragments found at the scene matched it perfectly. He also showed them where he'd tossed the house keys Tom gave him and the clothes he was wearing.
So, physical evidence now directly linked Beard to the act.
Undeniably, his confession was backed up by hard evidence he himself provided.
Which answers the who and how. Michael Beard committed the murder. But the why for Tom Clayton Why orchestrate something so horrific? Was it just the marriage problems? Affairs?
They found he was having multiple affairs, yes, but digging into his finances revealed the deeper, colder motive.
He wasn't as successful as he seemed.
Exactly. Despite the image, he was in serious financial trouble. Sources say the money was running dry. He'd apparently told people he was done with the marriage but couldn't afford a divorce.
And then there was the insurance.
The key piece. Just a year before the murder, Tom had significantly increased their life insurance policies.
Not much.
He doubled Kelly's payout specifically to $1 million. His own went up to $2 million.
$1 million. That's a powerful motive if you're desperate and ruthless.
It became crystal clear. Tom couldn't afford a divorce, but a $1 million insurance payout. That solved his problems. He hired Michael Beard to murder his wife for the money.
And others corroborated parts of this.
Yeah, a third party confirmed Beard had talked about being hired to kill someone for cash. The whole ugly picture came together.
Were there other pieces linking Tom to the planning?
Yes. CCTV footage actually showed Tom and Michael meeting at the ServPro building or a storage unit shortly before the murder. Their phone locations matched up too. This wasn't impulsive, it was coordinated.
And the escape plan. That detail is chilling.
Utterly chilling. His own attorney handed over a bag to the police. Inside, $100,000 in cash, Tom's passport, and crucially, the children's passports.
But not Kelly's.
Not Kelly's. The implication was stark. He planned to kill her, collect the money, and flee the country with the kids.
So even without blood on his clothes, the evidence of the conspiracy, the motive, the planning, it was overwhelming.
It was. He was arrested again, but incredibly granted bail again initially because that direct physical link to the act was still missing. That caused huge concern, especially for the children's safety with Kim.
But it finally went to trial.
It did. A long trial. Over 75 witnesses, more than 500 pieces of evidence presented. The jury heard it all.
And the verdict?
Guilty. Thomas Clayton was convicted of second-degree murder. Michael Beard, for his role, got life without parole.
Must have been some measure of relief for Kelly's family, for Kim, for the investigators.
Immense relief, though justice doesn't bring Kelly back. The sources mention Kim legally adopted the children, thankfully providing them a stable home after everything.
It really highlights how technology changed things, doesn't it?
Massively. That source quote rings true. If this crime had been committed 20 years ago, perhaps you would have gotten away with it. Without the phone data, the GPS, the deleted call records, it would have been incredibly difficult to prove the conspiracy.
So this deep dive really uncovered a dark story hidden behind a normal facade. Financial desperation, calculated greed leading to a brutal murder-for-hire plot.
And the courage of that little girl, Charlie, whose words were so pivotal.
It's just devastating for Kelly's family to realize the man she married, the father of her kids, planned her death.
It's an unimaginable betrayal, and it makes you reconsider Charlie's statement again, doesn't it? That the robber looked like her dad? Was it just the confusion of trauma, or did she sense something familiar even through the disguise? A deeper instinct.
That's a haunting thought. Given everything we've walked through from the sources, what do you think was going on in Charlie's mind when she saw that figure? And thinking about Tom without those digital breadcrumbs, the phone records, the GPS, could he really have gotten away with it?
Something to really think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a complex and ultimately heartbreaking case.